My father laughed and called me a guest who didn't contribute, and my family all agreed. So I left without a word. 2 months later, I made one phone call to my sobbing stepsister and proved that the guest was the only thing holding their entire lives together. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The flu had me in a headlock. It was the kind of sickness that makes your bones ache and your skin feel 3 sizes too small, a deep, rattling cough stealing my breath every few minutes. I was running a fever of 102, and every part of me just wanted to be in bed, submerged in darkness. But it was Friday, and my stepmom, Brenda, insisted on a mandatory family dinner. No exceptions, not even for illness. "We never see you, Jessica," she'd said, her voice dripping with that familiar saccharine disappointment. "Surely you can drag yourself out of your room for one evening." So I did. I showered, the hot water making me dizzy, and dressed in the cleanest sweats I owned. I shuffled into the dining room, my head pounding, and took my usual seat at the end of the table. My father, Anthony, was at the head, holding court as usual. My stepsister, Rosie, was glued to her phone, a smirk already playing on her lips, and Brenda was fussing over the roast chicken, casting pointed glances my way. I was too sick to eat. I just nursed a glass of water, the ice clinking against the glass as my hand trembled. The conversation was the usual buzz of neighborhood gossip and Rosie's latest college exploits, a new sorority party, a complaint about her ancient literature professor. I stayed silent, my eyes heavy, just trying to get through the next hour. "Rosie, you'll need to really focus on your midterms," Anthony said, puffing out his chest. He'd retired 6 months ago, which meant he now spent his days on the golf course or consulting, a vague term that, as far as I could tell, involved long lunches. "Your mother and I are proud of you, but we need to see that for." "I know, Dad," Rosie whined, not looking up. "It's just so much work, and my laptop is acting up again. I really need that new one, the one with the touch bar." "We'll see, sweetie," Brenda cooed, patting her hand. "Good grades deserve good rewards." Brenda then turned her gaze to me. Her smile was tight. "Jessica, you've barely touched your plate. I went to a lot of trouble for this meal." I cleared my throat, the effort sending a jolt of pain through my chest. "I'm sorry, Brenda, I'm not feeling well. It smells delicious, I just don't have an appetite." Anthony let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a kind sound. "Not feeling well, or just saving room for whatever it is you order to your room? I swear, that delivery guy is here more than you are." I flinched. "I've had the flu, Anthony. I'm working from my room, and I haven't wanted to get anyone else sick." "Working?" he scoffed, waving his fork. "Right, tapping on that keyboard." He leaned forward, sharing a look with Brenda, who nodded in encouragement. "You know, we were just talking about that, about contributions." My stomach, already uneasy, clenched into a tight knot. I knew this tone. It was the prelude to an ambush. "Brenda and I? Well, we've all agreed," he said, gesturing around the table. Rosie finally looked up, her eyes bright with malice. "You've been living here for 4 years now, post-college. You're 28 years old. You drift in, you drift out. You don't help with the yard, you don't clean the kitchen. You just exist in that room." I work," I stammered, my voice weak. "I work full-time, remotely." "Yes, your job," Brenda said, picking at her food. "But a home is about more than just existing. It's about being part of a family. You don't join us for movies. You don't help with the groceries. You're more like a boarder." "A guest," Anthony said, the word landing like a slap. "That's what you are. You're a guest in this house. And frankly, you don't contribute." I stared at him, my fever-addled brain struggling to process the cruelty. I looked at Brenda. She nodded, a prim little motion of agreement. I looked at Rosie. She was full-on smirking, enjoying the show. The 3 of them united. "We've all agreed," Anthony repeated, sitting back, satisfied. "It's time you started pulling your weight. Or perhaps it's time you found your own place. We're not a hotel." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the scrape of Anthony's knife on his plate. I waited. I waited for one of them to crack, for one of them to say, "Dad, that's too harsh," or "We're just kidding." Nothing. They just watched me, expectant, waiting for me to break, to argue, to plead. My hands were shaking, but not from the fever anymore. It was a cold, clarifying rage. I looked. At my father, a man I had once idolized. I looked at my stepmom, who had pretended to be a mother to me. I looked at Rosie, whose tuition I had paid just last month. And I saw them for exactly what they were. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't defend my 70-hour work weeks, my six-figure salary, or the fact that my tapping on a keyboard was the only thing keeping a roof over their ungrateful heads. Quietly, I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound unnaturally loud. I stood up. My head swam, but my resolve was iron. I picked up my water glass and carried it to the kitchen, rinsing it and placing it in the dishwasher. A small, automatic act of contribution. I walked to the entryway, grabbed my keys from the hook, and slipped on my shoes. "Where are you going?" Anthony called out, his voice laced with annoyance, not concern. "Dinner's not over. We're having this discussion." I paused at the door, my back to them. I didn't turn around. "You're right," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I am a guest, and it's rude for a guest to overstay their welcome. Good night." I opened the door, stepped out into the cold night air, and shut it gently behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't yell. I just left. No one said a word. No one followed me. As I walked to my car, the fog of my illness was replaced by a chilling clarity. The betrayal was worse than the flu itself. The drive was a blur. My fever, combined with the adrenaline coursing through my system, made the streetlights streak like watercolors. I drove for an hour aimlessly, just to put distance between me and that house, until the shaking in my hands subsided enough to use my phone. I pulled into a 24-hour pharmacy parking lot and booked a hotel room for the night. As soon as I got into the room, I collapsed onto the bed, the stiff comforter a poor substitute for my own, but it was safe. It was mine. I didn't sleep. I lay there, shivering, as the events of the dinner replayed in my mind. "You're just a guest. You don't contribute." The casual cruelty, the united front, they weren't just ignorant, they were malicious. They saw me as a parasite, a freeloader living off my father's generosity. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Rosie. "Wow, real mature, just walking out like that. Dad is pissed." I stared at the message, a bitter laugh bubbling in my raw throat. Pissed. Of course he was. His punching bag had just walked out of the ring. I ignored it. I ignored the follow-up text from Anthony an hour later. "You need to come back and apologize to Brenda. You embarrassed her." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to scream. I wanted to send them screenshots of the bank transfers, the utility bills, the mortgage statements, the tuition payments. I wanted to list every single thing my non-contribution had paid for over the last 4 years, but I didn't. An idea, cold and sharp, was beginning to form in the fog of my anger. Arguing would do nothing. They wouldn't believe me. They would call the statements fake, or worse, they'd pivot, saying I owed them that for the privilege of living there. No, an explanation was a plea. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to prove. They had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who I was before I moved back in. I'd moved back home 4 years ago when my father, Anthony, had a minor health scare. At the same time, he was forced into early retirement, as he put it. The company had downsized, and his consulting career never took off. He was stressed about money, about the mortgage, about Rosie starting college. I had just landed my senior developer role, a remote position with a Silicon Valley salary. "Move back home," he'd said. "Save money, help us out for a little while. Just until I get my new business off the ground." So I did, and a little while turned into 4 years. The first bill I took over was the internet. "The plan I need for work is more expensive," I'd explained. "I'll just put it in my name." Then it was the electricity, because my work-from-home setup used so much. Then the mortgage, a quiet, desperate request from Anthony one night when the bank was threatening foreclosure. "Just for a few months, Jess. Don't tell Brenda, it'll just worry her. The few months became permanent. Then came Rosie's tuition. She's so bright, Jess. It would kill me if she had to go to a state school. I'll pay you back every penny as soon as my ship comes in. I had done it all, and I had done it quietly. My one condition was that they didn't tell Rosie or Brenda to protect my father's pride. But I see now, in the sterile quiet of this hotel room, that it wasn't about his pride. It was about his control. By letting me pay for everything, he kept his lifestyle. By letting them believe he was the provider, he kept their respect. And by letting them treat me as the family freeloader, he kept me small, ensuring I'd feel worthy enough to question the arrangement. My phone buzzed again, a phone call this time, my father. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then I blocked his number, I blocked Brenda's, I blocked Rosie's. I opened my laptop, the screen bright in the dark room. My hands were steady now. The fever felt distant. I had work to do, not my job, but something more important. I had an escape plan to accelerate. I'd been saving for months, idly planning to move out, but I always let Anthony's guilt trip stop me. Not anymore. I spent the next 3 hours on real estate websites, scheduling apartment viewings for the next morning. They had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that the guest in the house was the one who held all the keys, and I was about to lock every single door. To understand the betrayal, you have to understand what I gave them. It wasn't just money, it was my life. When my own mother died, I was 19. Anthony was adrift and I became his anchor. I was the one who managed the estate, who cooked, who cleaned, who put my own grief on hold to manage his. Then, a year later, Brenda arrived. Brenda was polished. She was a woman who never had a hair out of place, whose nails were always perfectly manicured, and who specialized in a kind of soft, smiling criticism that left you bleeding before you realized you'd been cut. She was unemployed when she met Anthony, and she remained unemployed, her profession being the management of the household, a household she didn't pay for. From the moment she moved in, she saw me as competition. Her daughter, Rosie, was her darling, her prodigy. I was the leftover, the gloomy reminder of Anthony's first, and in my opinion, better life. I really did. I tried to bond with Brenda over recipes, I tried to mentor Rosie with her homework. But Brenda met every effort with polite dismissal. She redecorated the house, systematically erasing every trace of my mother. When I moved back in 4 years ago, my old room had been turned into Brenda's crafting room. I was given the small guest room in the basement, next to the water heater. It was cold, and the internet connection was spotty, but I didn't complain. I was helping. The sacrifices were constant. I gave up promotions that would have required me to relocate. I put my dating life on hold. It was hard to bring someone home to a family that treated me like a moody teenager. My tapping on a keyboard was, in fact, a highly complex job managing back-end systems for a major fintech company. It was stressful, demanding, and incredibly lucrative. While they were upstairs watching movies, I was in the basement on 1:00 a.m. emergency calls with an engineering team in Bangalore. Brenda, of course, framed my dedication as antisocial behavior. "It's not healthy, Jessica, being cooped up down there. You should get some sun." She'd say this while wearing a new tennis bracelet Anthony had bought her for their anniversary, a bracelet I knew for a fact had been paid for by my last performance bonus. Anthony was the true antagonist, the one who enabled it all. He had transformed from a grieving widower into a weak-willed man desperate to please his new wife. He let Brenda and Rosie set the emotional temperature of the house. His pride was a convenient shield he used to manipulate me. He needed to look like the patriarch, the provider, even as he abdicated all responsibility. And the easiest way to do that was to diminish me. If I was just the moody daughter hiding in the basement, no one would ever suspect I was the one paying for the theater tickets, the country club membership, and the European vacation they took last summer. A vacation I was not invited on because I work too much. My relationship with Rosie was even more fraught. She was 10 years younger and had grown up steeped in Brenda's entitlement. She saw me as a rival for her father's affection and, more importantly, his wallet. She was openly disdainful of my job. "I could never just stare at a screen all day," she'd say, flipping her hair. "I'm a people person." Her people skills mostly involved convincing Anthony to buy her things she didn't need. The most painful part was the tuition. I'd paid for every semester at her private, out-of-state university. It was a staggering amount of money, a sum that could have been a down payment on my own house. I paid it because I remembered my own mother's insistence on education. I thought, perhaps, this was a way to connect with Rosie, to give her a gift she would one day appreciate. Instead, it was just absorbed. It was expected. When I'd text her after a payment went through, just to confirm, her only reply would be KTHX. That night in the hotel, the full scope of their collective delusion hit me. They weren't just ungrateful, they were actively hostile. They had created a narrative where I was the villain, the uncooperative, unfun, unproductive burden. It was easier for them to believe that lie than to face the truth, that they were all, in their own way, completely dependent on the guest in the basement. The first week was a whirlwind. My flu, fueled by rage and newfound purpose, burned out in 48 hours. I used my sick days to handle the logistics of my new life. I found a sleek, modern one-bedroom apartment in a new complex across town. It was expensive, but it had fiber optic internet, a gym, and most importantly, a lease with only one name on it: Jessica. I signed the papers and paid the deposit on Monday. On Tuesday, I hired movers for a stealth extraction. While the family was out, Anthony at golf, Brenda at her book club, Rosie at class, or so I assumed, I let the movers into the house. We were quiet, fast, and professional. We took my bedroom furniture, my desk, my high-end computer rig, my clothes, and the few items of my mother's that I had kept hidden in storage. In 2 hours, my basement room was empty. It looked just as it had when I arrived, a cold, empty box. I left nothing behind. Not a stray sock, not a tube of toothpaste. I didn't leave a note. I set up my new apartment, reveling in the silence. I plugged in my system, and for the first time in 4 years, I worked in peace, with a view of the city skyline instead of a concrete window well. It was glorious. Now for the clever trap. It wasn't really a trap, it was just an absence. My leverage was the vast, invisible scaffolding of payments I had constructed to hold up their lives. All I had to do was stop. I logged into my bank account. My name was on everything. The mortgage was an auto payment from my primary checking account. The utilities, power, water, gas, and their premium cable internet bundle were all linked to my credit card, which I paid off monthly. Rosie's tuition portal was linked to my savings. My investigation wasn't about digging up dirt, it was about organizing the receipts. I spent that first week creating a master spreadsheet. I downloaded 4 years of bank statements, utility bills, and tuition invoices. I highlighted every transfer, every payment. The final tally was staggering. It was well over $200,000. The trap was simply to reroute my own life. I systematically went down the list. Mortgage, I canceled the auto payment. The next payment was due in 2 weeks, at the beginning of the month. Utilities, I logged into the power, water, and internet accounts. I removed my credit card as the payment method. I changed the contact email from my personal one to an old, unused one I had. I didn't cancel the services, I just stopped paying for them. The utility companies would handle the rest. Tuition, Rosie's next payment wasn't due for another month, but I logged into the portal and deleted my saved payment information. Phones, they were on a family plan. My line was the primary one. I called the provider, split my number off onto its own individual plan, and left their 3 lines on a new, separate account. The bill for that, I knew, would be sent to the house, addressed to my father. As I clicked confirm on the last change, a wave of panic washed over me. Was this too cruel? Was I abandoning them? The flu, the stress, the anger. Maybe I was overreacting. As if on cue, a notification popped up on my social media. Brenda had just posted a new photo. It was a selfie of her, Anthony, and Rosie at that same dinner table. They were all grinning, holding up wine glasses. The caption, "A wonderfully peaceful dinner. So nice to have just the real family here. Cheers to a drama-free future." The panic vanished. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I closed the spreadsheet, saved it to a secure cloud drive, and went to bed. The next few weeks were quiet. I thrived in my new apartment. My productivity at work soared. I reconnected with old friends. I started going to the gym. I felt lighter, like I had removed a lead-lined coat I didn't know I was wearing. I heard nothing from them, which confirmed they hadn't even noticed I was gone. Or if they had, they were too stubborn to reach out. They probably assumed I was sulking, that I'd come crawling back when I got hungry or lonely. They hadn't realized I wasn't their moody daughter. I was their benefactor. And the grace period was about to end. The first month passed in beautiful, productive silence. The mortgage payment for the house would have been missed. The phone bill would have arrived at the house, addressed to Anthony for the first time ever. The first round of utility bills would have been generated, mailed, and ignored, because why would they open a power bill when it's handled? I felt a grim satisfaction, imagining the small pile of unopened envelopes on the hall table, marked "Final Notice." The second month began. This, I knew, was when things would get real. Utility companies don't wait long. The first call came exactly 2 months, almost to the day, after I left. It wasn't from Aunt Honey or Brenda, their numbers were still blocked. It was from Rosie, calling from a number not found ID, which meant she was likely using a friend's phone. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was frantic. "Jessica, oh my God, pick up. The internet is off. I can't submit my paper, and my professor says I'm going to fail. Brenda is on the phone with the company, and they're saying the account is like 60 days overdue. What did you do?" What did I do? The blame was immediate. Not what's wrong, but what did you do? I didn't call back. I just sat there, looking at my phone. A few hours later, another voicemail. This one was even more hysterical. "Jess, the lights are off. The power is gone. Anthony is screaming at the power company, and he said the bill hasn't been paid in 2 months. He's blaming Brenda, and she's crying, and my laptop is at 10%. You have to call them. You have to fix this. This is your fault." My fault. It was fascinating, really. They had built their entire reality around my non-contribution, so when the actual contribution stopped, it was still, somehow, my failure. I waited. The grand finale, I knew, would be the college. It happened the next morning. A string of texts from the same unknown number. "Jessica, I am serious, you need to call me. My login for the class portal isn't working. It says my account is on hold. JESSICA, pick up. They kicked me out of MY classes. They said tuition WASNT paid." Then the phone rang again from that number. This time I answered. I said nothing, I just listened. "JESSICA, she shrieked, and the sound was a mix of pure panic and the familiar, spoiled rage I knew so well. "You did this. You're trying to ruin my life." "Hello, Rosie," I said, my voice calm. It was amazing how calm I felt. "What did you do? Why did you stop paying the bills? Dad is. He's losing his mind. He's at the bank and he said the mortgage." "Jessica, the bank is talking about foreclosure. You have to fix this. You have to call them and pay them. Now." "Why would I do that, Rosie?" I asked, examining a cuticle. The question stunned her into silence. What do you mean?" she stammered. It's the bills you've always." "Paid them," I supplied. "Yes, I have, but your father, your mother, and you all sat at that table 2 months ago and agreed that I don't contribute. You called me a guest. So, as a guest, I decided it was time to stop imposing. I got my own place, and I took my non-contributions with me." The silence on the other end was profound. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. What are you talking about? Took them with you?" "Rosie, who did you think was paying for your college?" I asked. "Dad," she said, but the word came out as a question. "Rosie," I said, and this is the moment I had replayed in my head, the line from the title. "Go and ask your father to show you the bank statements for the mortgage. Ask Brenda to find a single utility bill from the last 4 years that wasn't in my name. Then, I want you to log into your old college payment portal and check who's been paying the bills for the past 4 years. Then tell me who doesn't contribute." "You," she whispered. "You're lying. Dad paid for my school." "Then why are you calling me?" I asked. "If your father is the provider, why is he screaming at a bank? Why are your lights off? Why are you locked out of your classes?" The rage collapsed. The shriek was replaced by a sob. It wasn't a sob of remorse. It was the sound of a child who had just had her favorite toy broken. But, but my classes, Jessica, I'm going to fail my semester. You can't let this happen. It's $20,000. We don't have that. You have to pay it, please." "I don't have to do anything, Rosie," I said. "I'm just a guest, remember." I hung up the phone. The fallout was immediate. The case I had built wasn't for a lawyer, it was for them. It was the spreadsheet, the years of proof, and I was waiting for the right moment to show it. For now, I let the reality of their situation sink in. A few days later, a new number called me. Anthony. He must have realized I had blocked him. I let it ring. He left a voicemail, and it was a masterpiece of narcissistic rage. He didn't plead, he threatened. "Jessica, I don't know what kind of sick, childish game you're playing, but you've made your point. You've embarrassed this family. You will turn the power back on. You will pay your sister's tuition. And you will do it today, or I will have you disowned. You are not to consider yourself my daughter until you fix what you broke." He was threatening to take away something he hadn't offered me in a decade. It was laughable. I saved the voicemail. Then came Brenda. She didn't call. She sent a long, rambling email to my work address, which she must have dug up from an old file. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. She accused me of being unstable and vindictive. She claimed my sudden aggressive action had deeply traumatized Rosie and endangered Anthony's health. "Your father is under immense stress," she wrote. "You have always been selfish, but this is a new low. Whatever perceived slight you think you suffered, it's time to be an adult, apologize, and make amends. Your family deserves better." My family, they only claimed me when they wanted something. But Rosie was the one who was truly stuck. She was the one with the most to lose. Her entire future was imploding. She started texting me again, this time from her own, now unpaid phone, probably using Wi-Fi at a coffee shop. The tone had changed. The rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading, and slightly more strategic tone. "Jessica, please just talk to me. I don't understand. I asked Dad. He got really mad and wouldn't show me anything. Brenda is just crying and saying you're trying to ruin us. I went to the library and looked at the tuition portal. I saw the payment history. It was all from your credit card. All 4 years." That was the crack, the first tiny fracture in her reality. "Please, Jess, I believe you. I guess I never thought about it. I'm sorry, I really am. Can you just pay this one semester, just so I don't get kicked out? I'll pay you back. I promise, I'll get a job." This was the moment. This was the second confrontation. I texted her back, "I'm not paying it." Her reply was instant, "Why not?" I said I was sorry. I replied, "Being sorry is a start, but it doesn't fix the problem. The problem is that you, your father, and your stepmother built a life on my back and then insulted me for it. I am not an ATM, Rosie. I'm a person." I then did something I hadn't planned on. I attached the spreadsheet, the one with every bill, every date, every dollar amount. "The case," I had titled it. "Here is my contribution," I wrote. "Show it to Anthony and Brenda. We can have a family meeting if you'd like, but it won't be at the house, and it will be on my terms." The response was 2 hours later. He admitted it, all of it. I've never seen him like this. He said he was protecting his family and that your money was tainted by your bad attitude. Brenda is just sitting on the sofa, staring at the wall. The spell was broken. The image of the all-powerful patriarch, the provider, was shattered. All that was left was a weak, terrified old man and his equally useless wife, sitting in a dark, cold house, their guest no longer paying for the heat. Rosie texted again, "What do we do now?" I replied, "You get a job. You call your school and apply for an emergency loan. You asterisk figure out how to live in the real world. As for Anthony and Brenda, they can figure it in their own." "What about me and you?" she asked. "That's up to you," I wrote. "My treat-to-face dinner is next Saturday. If you want to talk, really talk, you can meet me there. But come alone." The treat-to-face dinner was a tradition my old work team had. Once a quarter, we'd go to the most expensive restaurant in the city to celebrate a successful launch. I had booked a table for two at Alara, a high-end steakhouse, under my name. I was going to have this dinner, whether Rosie showed up or not. I needed to mark the end of this chapter of my life. I arrived and was seated at a quiet booth. I ordered a glass of expensive Cabernet and was sipping it when Rosie walked in. She looked awful. Her hair was stringy, her eyes were red and puffy, and she was wearing a wrinkled sweatshirt. She looked like what she was, a college kid whose entire world had just been pulled out from under her. She slid into the booth, her eyes wide as she looked around the opulent restaurant. "Wow," she whispered. "Hello, Rosie," I said. "Hi," she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Thanks for inviting me." "Are you hungry?" I asked. The waiter came over. Rosie looked at the menu, her face paling at the prices. I'll just have water." "We'll both have the filet mignon, medium rare," I told the waiter. "And a side of the truffle potatoes, and another glass of this wine." Rosie looked at me shocked. "Jessica, I can't pay for that." "I know," I said. "I'm paying. This is my contribution for the evening." She flinched, and for the first time I saw genuine shame on her face. "That's fair," she said quietly. We sat in silence until the food arrived. She ate like she hadn't seen a hot meal in days, which might have been true. After she had finished half her steak, she finally looked up. I did what you said," she said. "I called the school, I spoke to the financial aid office. They said I can apply for an emergency loan to cover this semester, but my application for next semester will be different. I have to file as an independent and I have to get a job. A real one. I got hired at the campus library. It's only 15 hours a week. But it's a start." I nodded, impressed. "Good, that's a good start." "Dad and Brenda are. It's bad, Jess. They're selling the house. They have to, the bank. They're not waiting. Dad is trying to get his old job back, but they laughed at him. Brenda is looking for work. She's applying to be a receptionist." "A harsh dose of reality," I said, sipping my wine. "She hates you," Rosie said, her voice small. She says you're a monster." "And what do you say?" I asked, pinning her with my gaze. This was it, the final showdown. Not a public screaming match, but a quiet, intense moment of truth. Rosie took a deep breath. Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. I say she's wrong. I say we were wrong. I've been looking at that spreadsheet you sent. 4 years, you paid for everything. My clothes, my spring break trips. It all came from the account Dad had access to, which was the account you transferred money to every month. You paid for my life, and I smirked at you. I called you a loser behind your back. I was horrible." The confession hung in the air. It was more than I ever expected. "Why?" I asked, my voice softer. "Why did you hate me so much?" "Because you were good at something," she whispered. "You were smart. You had this whole secret world in your computer. Dad, he always talked about you like you were a disappointment, but I think he was jealous. And Brenda was jealous, and I was jealous. You didn't need them, and I did, and I hated you for it." It was the most honest, painful, and real conversation we had ever had. The public humiliation wasn't about me yelling. It was about her being forced to see herself, and her parents, in the harsh, expensive light of this restaurant, a world I belonged in and she could only access as my guest. "So what now?" I asked. "I'm going to finish school," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "On my own, with loans and my library job, and I want to say I'm sorry. Not because I want you to pay for things again, but because I'm just sorry. You were a sister to me, or you tried to be, and I let my mom and dad turn me into a monster." You weren't a monster, Rosie, I said, signaling for the check. You were just a product of your environment, but you're not a child anymore. You get to choose who you want to be. I paid the bill. As we stood to leave, I turned to her. I'm not coming back, Rosie. I'm never going to be part of that dynamic again. Anthony and Brenda are on their own. I know, she said. I'm not going back either. After this semester, I'm getting an apartment with friends. I'm done. She made her choice. She broke free. That was the triumph. The downfall of Anthony and Brenda was quiet but definitive. They sold the house in a panic, for far less than it was worth, just to avoid the foreclosure hitting their credit. The consultant and the household manager were now equals, humbled by the harsh reality of an electricity bill. They moved into a small, cramped apartment complex by the highway. The country club membership was the first thing to go. The golf clubs were sold. Brenda's tennis bracelets were pawned. My professional network, the one they mocked, was the key to ensuring justice. I didn't want them to be destitute, but I wanted them to be held accountable. I learned from a friend in real estate that Anthony, in his desperation, had tried to list the house without disclosing a known foundation issue. I made an anonymous call to the state board. The sale was held up, and he was fined, erasing most of the small profit they would have made. They ended up with almost nothing. Rosie, however, was a different story. Our dinner was a turning point. We started talking. Tentatively at first. She'd text me about her new job, complaining about shelving books. I'd text back, "It's called contributing." She'd send a laughing emoji. It was a start. When she graduated a year later on her own, with a mountain of loans, a 3.5 GPA, and a part-time job she'd held for a year, I was in the audience. She was the only one of her friends with no family there. I hadn't told her I was coming. When she saw me, she burst into tears and ran to hug me. "I did it," she sobbed. "I know you did," I said, hugging her back. I helped her get her first apartment. I didn't pay her deposit, but I co-signed the lease. I gifted her my old dining room table. Our reconciliation was slow, built on new, healthier foundations. She was working in marketing, and she was smart and driven. She was finally becoming the person I always thought she could be, now that she was free from the poison of her parents' entitlement. As for me, I thrived. I got another promotion. I bought a condo with a view of the water. I met someone, a wonderful man who works in the same industry, who respects my intelligence and laughs at my jokes. My life is full, peaceful, and, best of all, mine. The last I heard, Anthony and Brenda were still in that small apartment. He works part-time as a cashier at a hardware store, and she is a receptionist at a dentist's office. They are, for the first time in their lives, contributing. They don't speak to me, and they barely speak to Rosie. The truth was a pill too bitter for them to swallow. They are left with only their resentment in a small, dark apartment, paying their own electric bill. And I am finally free, vindicated, and at peace.